Women make up 50% of the population, so you would think statistically women should be 50% of the insolvencies.
I think that the reason why it's shifted, tradition has shifted.
I don't think it's different anymore where it's more men than there is women. And that's largely because women are in the workforce working.
What I've noticed in women over 35 is that they are more likely to be going through a divorce or separation. They're likely to have dependents, so they're going from 2 incomes to 1. It's a lot more difficult, especially given that over a certain age range, you're more likely to also have lower income than your male counterpart. If you've taken time off for maternity leave, you're also losing out on some of the advancing opportunities by taking that time off.
What I'm noticing the female debtors, quite often they're putting the needs of their family above themselves. So I'm more often to see a female helping out her adult children.
So the single biggest difference between men and women that I have seen over the nearly 15 years that I've been working with families initially, and now more specifically with women, is very much psychological, and it boils down to confidence.
I think they tend to juggle it for a little bit longer than men. I think they think that they can somehow manage it on their own, or that things will turn around.
So one of the biggest issues for women is the fact that they carry a disproportionate load with respect to unpaid work. Whether that's childcare, so the biological fact of the matter is that we are the ones who have the babies, and we tend to stay at home with the children as well. And what that does is it causes us to step off what Mariko Lin Chang, a US researcher, called the wealth escalator. So, imagine a 21-year-old man and a 21-year-old woman, and they both start their careers. They both start in exactly the same career, and they're chugging along. They're getting some great experiences. Maybe they're getting some bonuses or some raises as they go along. They're developing their skills. All is good. They both get married, but she has a child. So what happens when she has a child? She steps off that wealth escalator, that carpet that's moving forward in her life and in her career, and she stays home with the kids for a year, 2 years, maybe more. During that time, he's still in the workforce, and he's still getting exposed to some cool projects. He's still getting some really important skills, developing skills, contacts, all those things, building a network that we know help to grow wealth. So he's still doing that. He's still moving forward. She's hopped off. So when we talk about some very practical reasons, some ingrained reasons why there are differences in wealth and differences in debt levels for women, that's one of them, that women step off and now they fall behind.
Well, and it might not be the first couple of years. I mean, you're probably looking at 5 years until the child's in JK for full-time. But then if you've had multiple children, let's say it's 2 years apart, well, then you're probably at least 7 years before you get back into the workforce. And then you look at, okay, let's say you have, I'm trying to think of some diploma. Let's say you're a PSW. Well, now you get back into it 8 years later. Probably standards have changed, so now you have to now you probably have to upgrade to be able to get back into the job that you were qualified for in the first place. So now you're incurring more costs.
I find a lot of them are separated or have been alone for a long time, and their income is not high. It's pretty standard. They have to rely on either other sources of income, which would be payday lenders, credit cards, credit card limits that are extremely high because they got them years ago.
I'm Crystal and I'm 37 and I've had some struggles with debt.
My name's Natasha. I'm 34 years old and I am currently in the scariest financial situation of my life.
I'm Nicole. I'm 31 and I'm currently insolvent.
It doesn't really impact me or affect me because so many people are in it. So it's like a norm.
When I hear the word debt, the feelings and the words that come to mind are, it makes me feel sick. It instantly raises my anxiety. It's like a cloud that hangs over your head, and no matter what else is going on in your life, it's always just there, looming in the background. It's probably the biggest stressor in my life.
When I hear the word debt, or when you read about debt, I think debt is associated with, again, a negative association, but at the same time, it's becoming more and more acceptable. So with my experience, hearing about debt is stressful to me. I don't know. I don't really know any other way to answer that.
When I think of bankruptcy and myself, I don't think that I'm close to bankruptcy. I don't think that I think that what I'm doing right now is a harm reduction financial approach, so to speak, right? I'm managing little bits at a time. I know that my system could be improved.
So from the time I had my first credit card until the time, essentially in the end, the time I was in trouble with credit cards, jobs changed, continue to move up. You earn increases and you earn promotions over time, which come with more money. So it's very easy to justify spending more or having more credit available to you when your income increases, because you feel like it's a balance.
In the past decade, my emergency fund has been strictly credit, and that has been terrifying. Before that, in my early 20s, like, I tried to have that emergency fund in savings for whatever comes up.
I've been on my own since I was 16, so I didn't know what credit really was. So you, like, living on your own, you get cell phones or hydro or whatever, and you don't understand what that represents. And I've been in collections essentially since I was 18 with hydro and cell phone bill. And it was kind of like, oh, cell phone gets cut off, so you just go get a new one, right? Like, don't pay that bill. So this was my life for quite some time. It was a combination of things such as getting a place to live, rental applications. They do a credit check. You have next to no credit or bad credit. That's it. You're not getting approved for a place to live. And my life was very transient. I moved around a lot because I didn't know how to pay my rent because I didn't have money to pay it. So it's like kind of caught. And it was even when I was starting to build it, looking for a place to live, it was still affecting me. So every choice that I've made previously since I've been on my own has affected me up until this point when I'm 37. So over the past 14 years since I graduated college, I have been working my way up essentially the brackets of classes, right? However, the cost of living, so I rent a home. I have a family of 3, so me, my husband, and my son. We have a house. House comes with expense. Rent is not cheap. I can budget like crazy, but my budgeting just keeps me floating. It's survival. It's getting through to the next meal, to the next day, to the next everything. And it had been for up until about 3 years ago. And it's still rocky, but at the same time, I see improvements. I'm seeing things start to grow, and I want to be at a different place.
Moving around, changing careers, those were big for debt. I was introduced to credit lines after I bought my house. Before that, I had a credit card that I was able to pay back. Then I noticed that my credit card started, getting close to the limit, and the bank sent me a letter saying, oh, we can just, or actually I believe the first one, they just increased the limit. And then the next credit card limit increase, they sent me a letter, and I had just moved. I was broke. I had no other form of money, so I just called and agreed to the limit increase. So after I sold my house, I went from a double income to a single income, moved into an apartment, started paying all my own bills, and then the move started happening. I accumulated a lot of debt when I moved across the country and opened up a salon. And then the credit line I used for the move and for a wedding. Financially, relationships have really been a stressor on my finances with partners not working, or my ex-wife again not working, and the divorce just not going very well. Since my move, it's just been pretty much trying to keep up with the payments. When I opened my salon, I looked at consolidating my debt and approached a credit union, and they actually gave me more debt. They said, well, here's a $5,000 credit limit or credit line. If you pay this back in 3 years, then we'll look at consolidating your debt. So I spent that $5,000 opening up my salon and getting everything going, and I haven't been able to pay that back yet. So it's just been added to the debt.
So the first credit card that I had was a secured credit card. I actually obtained it when I was on maternity leave with my daughter, thinking that it would help to have some additional funds available while my income was low. And being that it was secured and I could pay the amount up front, it was no problem to get that. So by using that, within a couple of months, my limit went from the $250 I was offered up to $1,000, which I thought would be better, especially preparing to go back to work. So that was in 2011. So I had that card for a while. And then one day I was in the grocery store and was approached by someone that walks around in the store with the clipboard and, offers you additional points. So I was already a points member of that store, and was offered a credit card that would increase that point value and give me more money back, which I thought would be a logical decision, just to have an additional card, an emergency card that I could earn money on, right? So I did sign up for that. They had a little machine and there was instant approval, which I expected, and within a couple of weeks I had this second card. Shortly after I obtained that card, my ex-husband took a leave from work, and we found ourselves with far less income than we normally had to be able to keep up with these balances. So that card very quickly became replacement income. So while money was not coming in from a second source, that card replaced that and was being used for gas and groceries and bills. So we now had, rather than one card paying communal bills like utilities, there were now two cards that were paying independent personal bills, but only one person being responsible for paying those cards. So over time, those got out of hand and had to stop being used. The money had to just obviously come in and go right back out. It couldn't go to cards and wait for balances to be paid down with interest on top of it. There was no catching up anymore. The financial hardship that I faced after the separation was having to now raise my family and pay for our living expenses entirely on my own, while still trying to figure out if I could pay down this debt that was accrued by more than one person. That's essentially what led me to insolvency, was not being able to keep up with what more than one person created.
Well, when I read the question, what are the top mistakes women make that men typically do not when it comes to managing money and debt in particular? And I have to say I felt very uncomfortable when I read that, because there's an element of judgment in there and saying that women are doing something wrong. And that has not been my experience. So when it comes to the results that women have, what I have seen over the last 15 years is that men and women make the same so-called mistakes in terms of, choices that are not in their highest best interest that lead to significant debt, and then they're in a deep hole and they can't get out of it. So I've not seen any gender differences on that front. Where I have seen a difference is in a lack of core skills, core financial literacy skills. And I know that in your Joe Debtor study, that was borne out as well from that. There's a difference in how much women and men know, but is that a mistake? I don't think that's a mistake. I think that's a function of the fact that we are simply not educated, that we don't take financial literacy education seriously as a society. So one of my women's money group members said to me, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's one of the biggest issues, is that you go along, you think you're doing the right things, right? You've been socialized to behave in a certain way, and then life happens. And one of the biggest issues is divorce or death of a spouse. And all of a sudden you hit a brick wall, and now all of your vulnerabilities are exposed. And that's when you realize in a big hurry, oh my God, I don't have enough money to help me out of this situation. I'm not earning enough. I've got debt. Now I'm overwhelmed with debt payments, etc. So can we say that a lack of awareness is a mistake? I really don't think so. I think it's a much broader issue than that.
That's what they call it. They call it mistakes that I made when I was younger. I didn't know any better. And it's pretty evident that they didn't know. You walk into a bank, and at 18, they'll offer you a credit right off the bat, $1,000 credit card, overdraft, and I'm pretty certain it's not explained to you by the teller or the employee. It's sign this paper, and nobody reads those papers.
There's a few things I'm seeing with my female clients. Marital separation is a huge reason for the female clients that I've seen coming, and it's perfectly understandable. Generally, women have the lower income. They might be stay-at-home parents. All of a sudden, their spouse leaves. Their income is more than cut in half. And it's understandable that they have the same expenses, but yet they don't have the same income to help manage those monthly expenses. So then they're increasingly looking at proposals and consumer proposals in bankruptcy.
When I hear the word bankruptcy, the first word that comes to my mind is failure. I feel like that's kind of like there's such a stigma around bankruptcy.
When I think about bankruptcy or what bankruptcy is without fully understanding it, there's a very negative association that comes with it. It's as if being bankrupt or facing bankruptcy is almost essentially like being branded as a failure, that you haven't made it in the financial world, that you can't keep up. And I almost think that it's made that way so that people continue to get more credit, to, like rolling credit over, credit paying credit. Bankruptcy to me, I now know, is not as scary or as bad of a thing as maybe banks or media make it out to be. But you're made to believe that it's like the be all and end all, that if you're bankrupt, you're ruined.
From my own experience, stress is a killer. Don't let it get the better of you. Don't let the debt bully you. You bully the debt. Come in, know what your options are, stay in control of the situation, and how quickly you move and what you do next will be up to you, but at least you're in the driver's seat. And that, to me, is the most important thing for women, is to feel that they're in the driver's seat, as bad as the situation may be.
Especially when it comes to high interest lenders, before you go to a high interest rate lender, stop, look at your situation. That's the point where you should be seeking some help to deal with your debt before your debt just keeps spiraling and then becomes too out of control. So you'll eventually be heading towards an insolvency. So just take control of your situation before it gets worse.
The first time I ever went to a payday loan was because I have 2 dogs at home, and one of my dogs decided that he wanted to eat a sock and he had to go to the vet, and I didn't have the money to cover the vet bill, so I had to go and take a payday loan out in order to get him his x-rays and things like that, so that's why.
Yeah, I think my first credit card was when I was in university. I was very fortunate that my parents saved and invested well and paid for my university education. I only had to cover my incidentals. They covered all the basics, but I still managed, because I had access to credit, I managed to rack up some debt graduating from university. So I think I had a bit of the opposite approach to what I do now. It was a little bit of magical thinking around, well, I'm going to make money, I'm going to be able to pay it back, it's no problem. And I did. It took me 7 years.
My husband and I, it was just, we were getting swallowed. And just because it was too easy to use. So we just kind of went, no, you know what? We need to get rid of them, stop using them, and just really pushed paying them off. Got rid of all of them, except for one, like I said. It was a couple years that it took us. Especially, department store ones, or those, not just a MasterCard or a Visa. And we eliminated about 4 of them, 4 or 5. And like I said, we just have one, and it's just a joint credit card that has nothing on it, so.
Very expensive. Always having to pay back more, and then you have to continuously reloan because you had that extra money to begin with, but then you have to, in order to pay it down slowly, I would have to take, if I took out a $600 loan in the beginning, then I would have to, each time I would lower it by $50, and you end up being in them for 6-7 months. It's crazy.
I'm so embarrassed to say I did not have a plan. I just figured that I would have money and it would be no problem. I guess in the end it worked out. It took a lot longer than I thought, and it wasn't really until I graduated and I had rent to pay, I was more directly in control of my expenses. That's when I really started to look at it. Okay, how much can I really afford to spend here?